Handsome Hockey Podcast. 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 Handsome Hockey Podcast.
All right, everybody. We are here with episode 50 of the Handsome Hockey Podcast. I am recording from, well, we're both recording from our bedrooms because I was a little sick earlier in the week and we're just, playing that safe. My name is Jake and I am here with
Evan, and we are your Handsome Hockey hosts.
We host the podcast, whether we're handsome or not. That I think our significant others would agree that we are. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, we rely on their bias generally.
Maybe our mothers would be like, "Oh no, you're handsome. No, you're really handsome." They'd say it very convincingly.
You know whose mom thinks they're handsome, but didn't actually get to see them play is Riley Tufte's mom. She kind of got screwed out of watching her son return home to play the Wild for the Dallas Stars. And, she saw him take warm-ups perhaps, but then he was healthy scratched at the last possible moment by Rick Bowness. And people were incensed, to put it lightly.
I guess I just don't get it. Jeff Blashill did the same thing to Dennis Cholowski last year. It just doesn't make, they're playing their hometown. It's not like Riley Tufte is hurting the team. He's obviously of NHL caliber if you're willing to call him up to the big squad. So play him in his hometown, especially if the guy spent all of his allocation money buying tickets for his family.
Yeah, something like $50,000 buying tickets for his family to come see him play because he thought, this was going to be his first game as a call-up in the NHL. In his hometown and got screwed out of it.
He actually borrowed money from full-time NHLers to buy more tickets for his family to play to watch him play.
Which is apparently sort of normal for these types of endeavors. And I think, maybe the older players get some ticket allocation too that they donated to him. But yeah, people were calling for Rick Bowness's head far and wide for a roster move that he didn't even think about. He was just oh yeah, we're setting lineups. We're just gonna, it was like he was setting his fantasy lineup and he didn't think, oh, hey, this kid's first game, he's excited to play and he's got maybe some fans that are going to be there. And, yeah, he definitely bore the brunt end of that, and for good reason.
Yeah, it's just a stupid thing to do. In a year of stupid NHL things, why add this to the pile? Just give the kid his first start.
One of those minor big tragedies. It was oh, this came so close to be a really interesting human interest story. And you decided you really needed to start Joel Kiviranta, who, is good, but kind of a bummer.
He can sit for a game.
Yeah. Also in interesting roster news, Matt Murray was waived after signing a large multi-year deal with the Senators and then just being very bad. Could not have seen this coming. Shocked face.
Also, in totally shocking news, nobody claimed him.
Yeah, right. So Matt Murray being paid a lot of money to play AHL hockey. There are worse things to be in this world.
He can give it the Ilya Bryzgalov treatment, where he just shows up and takes everybody out to dinner and then says, "Hey, this one's on the Flyers."
Yeah, and then he decides to get really into astrophysics. That would be doing the full Ilya Bryzgalov.
I don't know if Matt Murray is a astrophysics kind of guy, but we'll see. Also in weird hockey roster shenanigans, including the Senators. Adam Gaudette was waived by the Blackhawks, promptly picked up by the Senators, and then promptly scored.
Yeah, Adam Gaudette, Michaela Gaudette's husband. He was kind of in and out of the lineup. He had some moments where he looked pretty decent for the Hawks. But they're kind of, it seems like the new GM is maybe cleaning house a little bit. I don't understand the move a lot because I think he's still a player with promise. And the Senators have gotten him basically for free. They got Victor Mete for free. Like, what is it with NHL GMs doing Pierre Dorian's job for him? Like, here on a platter, here's two really good young players. And, maybe you'll make them into something if you can find a goaltender. Maybe not. We'll see.
Well, Anton Forsberg had like a 43 save win tonight, so maybe they're on their way.
Yeah, I mean, anybody and their mom could have told you that Matt Murray was not very good, nor worth that contract.
I told my mom that in a phone call. I was like, Mom, Matt Murray's not very good. She's like, who's Matt Murray? And I was like, you'll see. He's not very good.
She was like, Jake, I don't care.
Is this about your podcast? Oh, shut up about it already. Thanks, Mom.
According to Michaela, she was actually doing a witchy seance at the time that he scored. She had his sticks upstairs while not watching the game, and maybe, had a smudge stick in there. She was doing some witchy shit, and apparently that works. So keep on doing the witchy shit, Michaela. We're fully behind you.
Only if she wears a full-on witch costume and has a cauldron. Yeah,
I really wonder the rate at which modern witchy people have large cauldrons. Like, those are expensive. That's a lot of iron and steel. That's a big effort to clean.
I would think an NHL player could afford a cauldron.
So what did you buy with your first NHL paycheck? Well, I got my girlfriend her witchy cauldron.
And then the rest of the team goes, cool.
And then he magically goes on a scoring streak, and the rest of the team goes, I need a witchy girlfriend.
Yeah. So about that cauldron, can we come over?
Yeah.
And they're thinking typical hockey girlfriend who is extremely attractive, and it's this old brooding grandmother stirring a pot of eyeballs, and they're like, maybe we're not into this anymore, actually.
Yeah, and in typical hockey wag fashion, she's like a blonde Scandinavian supermodel, stirring this cauldron of eyeballs.
It's me. Sorry.
So one of the more notable roster decisions that we saw this week was Evander Kane was waived and unsurprisingly not picked up with his giant cap hit, but sent to play in the AHL. This in the same week where his wife released a video of him waving an allegedly loaded gun at her. And she was also, in their custody case, sent for a psychological evaluation because she does repeatedly keep kind of breaking court orders to keep these things quiet, which to me is kind of BS. If you have a video of your ex-husband pointing a gun at you, you should probably be able to put that in the public domain.
And she should have been like, oh, wait, there's a court case? Oh, I didn't know. We've been talking about Evander Kane for 7-8 months now. We've been talking about Evander Kane for so long now that I don't even know that I have much more to say about it outside of I just really wish it could resolve itself soon so I don't have to keep talking about it.
Yeah, and for their children's sake. We keep forgetting that there are children involved, and both parents seem pretty unhinged, and you really kind of feel for the kids. I mean, I think Anna Kane is she's suffering from some serious trauma that he's perpetrated on her. But she's in a hard situation, and it has acted out in ways that have probably ruined her legitimacy to some people. A lot of people think of her as a liar, and like Evander Kane's defense attorneys released a statement saying that the video was a part of a photography shoot, which as a photographer, I buy 0% of. What photo session do you do with the loaded weapon unless maybe you're Alec Baldwin? Like, it didn't seem like a photo session. He's like walking past his SUV in the garage, and he just kind of like casually turns back and points this gun at her. But a lot of people have like put stock in his lawyer's arguments that this was part of a photo session. And it's like, what photo session you take loaded gun to, buddy?
Where are the photos then?
Yeah, that's also
show us the professional photos. Where was the photographer? Who were they?
Which would be hilarious if he was like, yeah, we're doing a gangster rap photo with my guns. And, we're like Evander Kane was trying to rehab his image at one point, maybe by like really leaning into being seen with weapons. Like, I don't know. That seems a little misguided, but I'm not going to put anything past this guy at this point.
Everything makes sense in this case. Like, somebody could be like, he bought a hippopotamus, and I'd be like, yeah, he did.
And a lot of people will say like, oh, you're all haters and you want to see him fail. And it's like, no, actually, we've kind of been actively rooting for this guy to figure his shit out. And it seems like at every step of the way, instead of going in that direction, he's making it worse. So, we would much more prefer to see him succeed and be the exciting hockey player that he's been, instead of wasting his family and his own money with expensive lawsuits and a gambling addiction.
Maybe the only funny part out of all of this is that the AHL team that he's playing with, the Barracuda, share the same building, the practice building, as the Sharks. So like, he's in the same building as the team that clearly does not want him ever playing for them ever again. And I was reading an article in The Athletic, and they were saying that it's like this incredibly long hallway from like the Barracuda practice facility to the Sharks. And I was just like, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I mean, I guess that makes some sense to have your AHL team and your NHL team close together, but that's got to result in some awkwardness. Like, does Erik Karlsson see him in the hall and be like,
as long as Dustin Byfuglien isn't there, it should be all right.
I mean, Dustin Byfuglien is drunk and fishing somewhere. Let's be real.
Yeah. Well, if you are fishing, you should be drunk. Like, how else would you fish?
Fishing is not encouraged.
The people who like fish professionally, like, get paid to fish, are you not drunk for that? Why are you? Why?
I get the impression that, maybe they're sober, or maybe they're just like slipping flasks here and there. And
I hope so. Otherwise, what a boring ass life that is.
I mean, maybe they actually catch fish, so it's not as boring for them compared to us. Speaking of big fish to fry, the IOC has challenged one of the sort of significant pillars of the trans athlete issue, especially with relation to PHF and women's hockey, as we've discussed previously. They've come out and said that, hormone therapy is perhaps not the right way to cage who is not a woman. And they've also come out against waiting periods, and the PHF and their trans inclusion policy, with air quotes, has stipulated a 2-year waiting period, whereas a much larger fish, the IOC, has said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So it's been a fairly interesting development, I think. I don't know if anybody else is kind of connecting these two dots super heavily, but like, could this put some pressure on the PHF to be more inclusive in the future? The IOC,
in theory, yes. I mean, I don't think the PHF is in any way governed or has like some sort of attachment to the IOC. In fact, a lot of their players, a lot of the women's players play in the PWHPA or play in Europe. The PHF has some Olympians on its rosters, but it's not predominantly made of Olympians. So, but I mean, in the global struggle for trans athletes, this is a huge step. This is monumental, and hopefully it has that sort of trickle down effect to these entities that are, not as visible as the IOC, where they say, oh, well, like the governing body of world amateur sport just said, hey, let's knock this shit off. Maybe other women's leagues, and men's leagues throughout the world. And, for us in this podcast, especially the PHF, can say, hey, you know what? That 2-year waiting period was a little bit misguided. We're gonna revise that, and we're gonna come back with something new next year. You can revise policies as much as you want. Like, that's the thing about being the governing body of your policy. You can revise them at a whim, on a lark, if you prefer. And so, obviously it's set for this year. It is what it is. It's a better policy than their old policy, but it still kind of sucks a little bit. Maybe they go to the table. It'd be awesome if they would release a statement saying, hey, we saw what the IOC put forth with regards to trans inclusion in games that they govern. We are going to look at that, and we're going to see how their policy and our policy could be more aligned. And then they take the season, they come out at the end of the season and say, hey, this is our new policy. We waited till the season was done. We wanted to make sure that, there wasn't, there's a roster liability there. I don't know. But, they can come out this next summer and say, hey, this is our new policy. It's basically the same policy without the worst part of it, which was that 2-year waiting period. So there's hope. Every time one of these laws is abolished or these like stipulations are changed in favor of trans athletes, it's a good thing. We saw over the summer in the United States, especially, that, trans athletes, trans women especially, were being effectively eradicated from sports by these stupid ass, misguided, unscientific, right-wing conspiracy theory laws throughout especially the American South, but throughout the United States. And, so for the IOC to step forward and say, you know what, this isn't backed by science, we're not going to follow it, we're going to amend our policy. That's a huge step. And hopefully it, a lot of the political firebrands of the day or political issues of the day are things that people use to rile up their base for 10 minutes or 10 hours. And then like something like this happens. And then like very quietly, 5 years down the road, all of these laws are off the books and nobody gives a shit about it anymore because nobody's stirring the pot. Right. Including the people who were the original pot stirrers. They just don't care because it's not a hot button issue for their folks anymore. So hopefully that can happen here, and we'll start to see these laws come off the books. And hopefully, as far as this podcast goes, hopefully the PHF can rethink their stance as well.
Yeah, 10 U.S. states have laws restricting trans students' inclusion in sports. That's according to NBC News and the Movement Advancement Project, which is a think tank on the issue. And yeah, usually I see the IOC as sort of reactive and kind of not very helpful. I mean, I can't think of one offhand, but I know that they've, made some pretty boneheaded decisions in the past, but this seems to be a little piece of leadership that they've done. So they've put out a 10-page document called the IOC Framework on Fairness, Inclusion, and Non-Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity and Sex Variation. And where this seems to succeed, where the PHF has sort of failed, is it seems like they included trans athletes in drafting this and the up-to-date science. And, hopefully the PHF can adopt something similar next season or in the future.
Speaking of trans issues in the PHF, Digit Murphy spoke this week, not about trans issues this time, which was nice. Well, actually, Digit's never actually spoke about trans issues except for that one interview with D.F. Pendries. Digit Murphy, however, spoke up and said that the PHF is at war with the PWHPA for what is effectively the soul of women's hockey in North America, I guess, which is a silly thing to be fighting over, to go to war for. But this completely contradicts the words from before the season of the president of the PHF, stating that they wanted to work together to create with the PWHPA to create a more cohesive women's hockey landscape in North America. So for this to come out, it's just like, one, why choose now to say this? Why is this an important thing? Like, Digit Murphy used to coach in the Canadian Women's Hockey League. She's coached in the NCAA. Like, why is she stirring the pot? Why is she all of a sudden this muckraker who has to incite a riot every time she speaks? And
I did sort of catch some wind about why. It's that she feels that anybody that participates with the PHF is then outcast from Canadian coaching circles. So I think she feels like the PHF is getting the short end of the stick. And I don't know, it's hard not to see where she's coming from in some parts of that. I don't exactly like to align myself with Digit Murphy, but I do wonder, to what point she's just kind of calling the situation as it is. I mean, the PWHPA hasn't done the PHF any favors. They're not any closer to the sort of joining that we would like to see into one sort of coherent, well-paid women's hockey league. Maybe there's a little bit more nuance and content and really passion for, her league than we maybe want to let on. I don't know.
I think I just have a big problem with the language. Say that then, right? Say
it's very high school football.
Yeah, say my colleagues have been blacklisted from Canadian jobs and whatever, merely because they have participated and coached in the PHF. Don't say we're at war, like she's fucking Norman Schwarzkopf or some shit. Just tell us what it is instead of this hyperbolic rhetoric. We've got enough hyperbole in the world right now. We don't need more. We especially don't need it in what seems like a very detrimental way. Especially after the president of your league tried desperately to smooth over that rupture earlier this year. If maybe they're both working towards the same thing here, which is making it so these people who have participated in the PHF have access and have the opportunity to get different jobs or whatever. But it seems like one is probably a bit more proactive than the other. And
yeah, she's definitely shooting her own goals in the foot by saying such. And, I can understand the frustration with kind of political freeze out by the PWHPA and, a kind of process that seems like it's not going anywhere, but it's probably not going to go anywhere faster now. If anything, this hurts her own goals. So, Digit Murphy steps in it again.
And, if that's what she wants to do, obviously there are no ramifications for her actions whatsoever. I mean, she's still where she wants to be. So, Godspeed, I guess. I don't know. Like, it seems like a shoot from the hip, like Yosemite Sam type of response to something that just didn't need to happen. Speaking of the PHF, they were not in action this past weekend due to the American Thanksgiving holiday. Currently, we do still have the Boston Pride atop the standings. They have still also played more games than anybody else. The real story, I think, is the Toronto Six are undefeated, 3-0 so far, with a +6 goal differential in those 3 games. So they're outscoring every team they play by 2 goals a game. They look real good. They look super legit. Their defense looks better than I think a lot of people anticipated. And their offense is exactly what we thought it would be. Like, they're a very fast, fluid, skilled hockey team. And if their defense can keep up with the offense, they're going to be nigh impossible to stop.
Yeah, that's kind of the story so far in the season. Behind them in the standings, you have the Ribs, followed by the Whale, and then my Minnesota Whitecaps. And then the bottom, you got Buffalo. And what Buffalo really needs is another rough start to their hockey team because, Buffalo just can't catch a break.
It's bad when the Sabres were better out of the gate than the Buttes. The Buttes, I think, have played better than their record states. They're really young. They have so many rookies on that team. And they've played well, but it's just like that takes time, it's a faster league. It's a stronger league. It's just a different level of competition than a lot of these women are used to. And so that it takes time to adjust. I think what we might see is like the Buttes have kind of a rough first half of the year and then kind of gel towards the end of the year. And then next year they look like this really strong presence. But, this year, it just doesn't seem like it's their year so far. The Whale got shellacked their last weekend out. So they are falling back to earth. They need to fix things on the defensive end real bad. Amanda
Boillier buried an OT winner against her former team. That'll be a bit of a dagger if you're, you have to let a free agent go and then, she sinks you in one game. Like that's rough.
Switching back to the NHL, big news in Montreal. I think first off, this wasn't the Canadian team I think we thought would fire everybody first. But, Vancouver's just sitting pat. So Montreal decided to stand up and fired everybody. So reportedly Jeff Molson, the owner of Montreal and also of a fantastic beer company, had a meeting with Scott Mellanby early in the week. And Scott Mellanby, it was kind of assumed would be the successor to Marc Bergevin whenever, or when his contract ran out this year or, ultimately whenever. Apparently that was not meant to be because after the meeting, Scott Mellanby promptly resigned from his position. The next day, Marc Bergevin, GM Marc Bergevin, assistant Trevor Timmons, and then the VP of communication, Paul Wilson, who you'll remember freezing for a long time when asked about a very obvious question about Logan Mailloux, all fired. They're all gone. Jeff Gorton was named the executive vice president of hockey operations, which sounds like a demotion because he's the vice president, but it turns out that Jeff Molson is the president of hockey operations. So really, he's just the guy below the owner. Jeff Molson talked about needing a bilingual general manager for this position. And so they got around that by hiring Jeff Gorton to be the VP of hockey ops. So there are a bunch of names swirling for the GM position. Probably the most interesting of which is Daniel Briere, which would be really, really interesting to see. But so far, nothing has come out. But we do know that they will be speaking French and English in their press conferences. Although Jeff Molson did not say they needed to be a francophone, just that they needed to be bilingual.
Yeah, really interesting because Jeff Molson, specifically said this is not related to the drafting of Logan Lemieux, who, if you remember, we talking about, was fined in Sweden for distributing videos of him receiving a sex act, and
against the wishes of the other participant.
Correct. And he said this wasn't related, but yet he fired almost everybody involved with A, that drafting decision, and B, the PR on the back end. So it's really hard to believe that, this had nothing to do with this. But to me, hockey community has not forgotten that they drafted this kid after he relinquished his spot in the draft and asked not to be drafted. They're the ones who took him in the first fucking round. Hard to believe that's not in play here. Also, the team sucks.
There it is.
When owners seem to act like this, it seems to be not because of one thing. Otherwise, we would have seen this whole, cavalcade of clowns cast to the side right away after the Logan Lemieux draft. But I think once they got to the season and saw, hey, there is nothing in this team that is going to resemble the fluke run to the Stanley Cup finals we just had. And so 20-something games after sort of meekly playing for the cup, they have an empty front office looking for a new GM. It's hilarious.
I mean, we all knew they were the worst cup finalist ever. So that's fine. I think it was Puck Soup talked about how their average points per season was 18th in the league over the tenure of Marc Bergevin. And for part of that, a large portion of those 9 years, they had Carey Price Woe, not Carey Price O. And so and all due respect to Carey Price, we know he's going through very tough times right now. We're just commenting on the fact that he hasn't been up to his usual his career averages over the last couple of seasons, last year's playoffs accepted. But you had arguably the best goalie in the world on your team, and your best, the best you could do was 18th over those 9 seasons. So, there's a lot there. You could probably say this is maybe a year or two too late, especially now that Bergevin has gone out and signed a bunch of guys who have long-term deals who are going to be hard to move. Jeff Molson said he was okay with a rebuild. He said the word rebuild as opposed to just a refresh. Seems like a bit of a stretch for this team since there is some real talent in place, and some young talent. I mean, Tyler Foley's not that old, but you've got Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. There is some talent there.
But you don't have Jesperi Kotkaniemi. You lost him to a hilariously embarrassing offer sheet in the off season.
Well, he's a free agent next year.
Sure,
they could do the same thing next year. It'd be great.
That would be funny.
Who wants Jesperi this year?
They lost Victor Mete for nothing. A good young defensive prospect. Their pipeline is not very suggestive of competing heavily in the future. I mean, you have Shea Weber's half-retired injured corpse back there somewhere. and then not a whole lot else on the defensive back end. You have Jake Allen. I mean, he's been excellent in relief of a mostly injured Carey Price. I mean, Carey Price is skating again. Maybe there's some reinforcements coming this season, but the future of the Montreal Canadiens does not look terribly good. And that's a hugely high pressure situation. Like if the people that had the audacity to say, hey, this team might not be very good, even though they lucked into a Stanley Cup final appearance with a hot goalie, they were maligned up and down the media for telling what would happen. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where this team goes from here.
Sticking with the NHL, we've had a lot of Bs lately. By Bs, I mean boys behaving badly and Brendan biting Brady. We'll get to that.
That's some good alliteration right there.
That's the most fun one. So we're going to keep you hooked till we get to the toddler fight that was Brady Tkachuk and Brendan Lemieux. Zdeno Chara became the oldest player in NHL history to receive a fighting major. This was on November 16th, I believe, against Patrick Maroon. Good for him. Why people fight him, I don't know. Like, I know Pat Maroon is a tough guy and doesn't back down, but how do you get, like, you have to get inside Zdeno Chara in order to fight him, and you can't do that. So, like, what? Just stop trying. Don't do it anymore. Also, he's old.
Like, getting inside Zdeno Chara is like, does he like eat Nathan Gerbe, who then stabs him and like comes out of a dead Zdeno Chara like through the mouth, like some Noah and the whale shit?
It's got to be like Neo in the first Matrix, where you just dive into his stomach. I'm thinking like a 5'10" Yanni Gord, like diving in and then coming out of him while flexing. People have been trying to fight Zdeno Chara for like 200 years now, and I don't think anybody's gotten the best of him, and I just don't understand it. Like, just say, you know what, Big Z, you got this one. I'm good. Like,
although I think who else got mad and went Super Saiyan was Ron Brindamore, who was fined $25,000 for a fairly sort of innocuous seeming mad at the refs tirade. Not mad enough that the refs actually complained, but apparently it was enough that the NHL came and fined him 5 times as much as a player can be fined for bad on ice behavior for looking angry. I mean, Rod Brindamore, he does a really good job of looking angry. But this seems like overkill.
He looks like he's 3 seconds away from Hulk smash at any moment. Like, it's like that's just what he looks like. It's not that like, yeah. I mean, we're going to talk about much worse behavior and also much funnier behavior. And so the fact that Brindamore was fined the most out of all of this is just kind of ridiculous.
So Brad Marchand was involved in 2 very distinct incidents this week, one of which got him a suspension and one of which just got him a hockey glove thrown at him. What should we do first?
Let's stick with the funny. Artemi Panarin and him are, and as we've said, I think multiple times on this, like, Artemi Panarin's smile just lights up a room, and he's just like such a wonderful, like, cherubim type of figure. And
playing hockey with his dog is like one of my favorite, like, comforting videos to watch.
Brad Marchand is obviously incredible at getting under the skin of everyone. Marchand and Panarin are jawing at each other from one end of the bench, the Rangers bench, to the one end of the Boston bench. And a ref like turns around and looks at it and then turns back to the game. And as he does this, Artemi Panarin throws his glove at him, which I don't believe I've seen before. And again, Artemi, so nice and wonderful, Artemi later came out and said that Marchand said something against Russia, which, that's where Artemi's from. And while Artemi has politics that are not, shall we say, fascist, so he disagrees with the current state in Russia and has gotten into hot water with that, it's still his home country.
Well, I think that's the crux of what Marchand said to piss him off. It was something like, nobody likes you there. You're not going home for Christmas kind of thing, which absolutely appropriate to just chuck your glove at him. Marchand, to only add to the hilarity, when asked about it after the game, must have had this canned line that he thought of after getting the glove tossed to him. But he said, yeah, we talked about what we had for Thanksgiving and Artemi didn't like what I ate, which come on, that's fucking funny.
I've said this multiple times. I used to hate the guy. I used to absolutely hate him, but I really just kind of love Brad Marchand at this point. He's fun.
Yeah, if you're going to induce that kind of hilarity and then have a one-liner to back it up, that's the kind of shit that the NHL needs.
Much more of. On the opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah, he committed a pretty obvious slew foot and got a 3-game suspension for it. I think part of the issue was he's basically gotten away with a couple of other pretty bad slew foots. There were a couple over the 3 years he has not been suspended that were pretty obvious in retrospect, but not called on the ice because they're behind the play or had some deniability, basically. Whereas this was a pretty clear slew foot. After kind of thinking it was maybe egregious to give him 3 games for this, I think it was the right call.
Leave it to George Peros and the Department of Player Safety to make me argue with him. I agree that a slew foot should be punishable in this way. It's just we've seen so many of them already this season that have gone unpunished, PK Subban, I believe, on Ryan Reeves. PK Subban's done it a couple of times this season. We've seen a number of them already. We saw them policed at the end of last year, but not so much the beginning of this season. So
what differentiates the PK Subban slew foots from the Marchand slew foots is the upper body aspect, where usually where PK Subban essentially had committed 3 slew foots this month, but they were the kind where he was coming in behind with a wide stance and he took out one of the guy's legs. There was no upper body in it. Whereas Marchand, gets his upper body in it and really flips the guy and, has a high chance of resulting in a head injury or worse. So I think there was a bit of a injury potential calculus there.
I thought the PK Subban ones were super malicious, and because of that, should have resulted in at least a fine, if not a suspension. And so that's where I have issue, is that why are those not even called into question, whereas this one was? But I do agree that a slew foot should always result in a suspension of some sort. It's one of the most dangerous plays in hockey.
Looking back, I kind of did some research, and looking back at previous slew foots, it should have been a penalty. Maybe gotten a fine. I don't know if it's congruent to suspend him, because Mark Giordano committed almost an identical slew foot going into the boards in 2013. He received a 2-minute minor and a $10,000 fine. Seems more or less appropriate. Maybe even a 5 for slew foot. That would have been the appropriate response. So I think the Department of Player Safety has gone overboard because, he hadn't received any sort of punishment yet.
In other boys behaving badly, so in a move that surprises very few people, the son of Claude Lemieux is a cowardly turd.
Could have guessed.
Yeah, who would have seen that coming? Brendan Lemieux and Brady Tkachuk got in a fight over the weekend, I believe. And in this fight, Brendan Lemieux bit Brady Tkachuk on the hands not once, but twice. I was hoping it was 3 times so I could say thrice. but here we are. There's this video from the penalty box of Brady Tkachuk showing the refs on his hands where Brendan Lemieux bit him. Like, if this were a murder case, they would be able to tell that Brendan Lemieux was the culprit, or at least had come by to try and get a snack by the dental imprints on Brady's hands. Brendan Lemieux was given a 5-minute major for fighting and given a misconduct penalty for what I'm going to guess was unsportsmanlike conduct, but might as well have been biting. He was also given a rabies vaccine after the game. He's lucky he was not a raccoon. Otherwise, they would have had to put him down. Brady Tkachuk, for his troubles, was given a 5-minute major for fighting and also given a tetanus shot after the game. Brendan Lemieux was given a 5-game suspension after an in-person hearing with the Department of Player Safety. This seems like the smaller punishment between the two of getting a 5-game misconduct or getting a 5-game suspension and like forfeiting like $38,000 in salary, or now possibly being an even bigger embarrassment than your father. So
Lemieux hit someone in his own day.
Yeah, and in a famous turtle, Claude Lemieux is, widely regarded as a jerk who nobody likes, and it turns out his son is the exact same way, which is actually something that Brady Tkachuk said in the post-game interview, that nobody likes him and that he'll be out of the league in a couple of years because he's also not that good, which was hilarious. That's some
post-game presser was so epic. Like, just reading the transcript, it's just like, damn. Oh, damn. He ruined this man's whole life. Made all the more hilarious when someone took the transcript and paid Gilbert Gottfried to read the whole thing in a video. I encourage people to look up the Gilbert Gottfried Brady Tkachuk rant because it's so funny. I mean, like, Brady Tkachuk, when he said this stuff, was like actively pissed. Like, Gilbert Gottfried is like he's like, why am I reading this? I'm doing this for a paycheck, but I'm going to put my all into it. And this whole situation was just bonkers. I almost want to like thank Brendan Lemieux for, giving us this insane memory to have. And like the poetic thing of son and dad both biting people while in the NHL. Like, you can't make this shit up.
First off, Gilbert Gottfried is a treasure, and we need to keep him in our lives as much as possible. Second, it's like there's like little angels and a little devil. This is a devil, apparently. I don't know what that hand gesture is. I'm not used to being on camera, but sitting on Brendan's shoulders, and they're both his dad, and they're both going, bite him. Like fucking Gollum biting the ring off of Frodo's finger. Like, this wasn't a reenactment of the fight at Mount Doom. This was an NHL hockey game, and you don't get to bite people in it, you jerk.
Yeah, this was crazy. A whole lot of people kind of came out after Brady kind of called Brendan Lemieux out and said, yeah, actually, he's not very well liked. I think Jonathan Quick kind of came out on Brendan Lemieux's side, as a teammate is wont to do. But I think everyone just kind of agreed that this is pretty congruent with the type of player that Brendan Lemieux is. And yeah, it was pretty egregious, and he'll probably have to answer for it.
One of the nice things that surfaced out of this was a video of Claude Lemieux and Keith Tkachuk fighting in like 1992. That was pretty funny. This whole situation was ridiculous. And honestly, I am here for the next couple of years of the Tkachuks just running Brendan Lemieux in hockey games because of this incident. Now we're gonna end this week's episode on some fun.
If you haven't already had fun with the biting,
this is a long theme of this episode is fun. So Jersey got a jersey in New Jersey It's technically a sweater. I mean, if we're going to be all hockey terminology about it.
Yeah, it says jersey on the front.
It's like they just labeled what it was. We'll get to the one that was actually worse than this in a minute, but like this, it's a third jersey for the Devils. Like they have a great color scheme. They have a great historical color scheme with green, also in their jerseys. They are the Devils, so you can do a ton of cool stuff with it. Like, why do something as like lame and boring as jersey?
I mean, to separate sort of like the jersey from the rest of the sweater, like I thought that, you know, just saying jersey on the front was pretty sweet. Like it's kind of like postmodern, you know, you can lean in it with a bunch of like merch that says like hat. I think Dougie Hamilton was spotted in a hat that said hat on it. You know, the whole like, this is not a pipe, like jersey. I don't know. I think that's hilarious from a design perspective, but the rest of the sweater was pretty boring. You know, some people like on Twitter and Instagram, like took some elements from their regular jersey, added it to this jersey and made it much better. So, you know, good move, but poor execution, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I think, honestly, third jerseys are almost never better than what the team usually wears, but it just seems like there's a complete lack of creativity in a lot of these design studios lately. Speaking of which, Nashville, who is playing in the Stadium Series against Tampa Bay this year, put out their Smashville jersey, and it's appalling.
It's kind of smash worthy. It's basically just a primer on what not to do from a typographical and jersey design standpoint. Some of the letters are cropped. All of the letters seem random sizes. There's a guitar pick in the middle with like Goku's, you know, orbs on that. And then
the Dragon Balls.
And then the C for captain or A is like, it's like halfway off the fucking shoulder. It looks like the C is trying to run away from the rest of the jersey. Yeah, it's absolutely abhorrent. Like, I don't even hate the idea. Smashville's whatever. This jersey is just bad.
I don't even know if it's a good idea. What really irks me about this is that there were ideas that they turned down that were worse.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the designer was like proposed that as like the shitty idea to set up a bunch of other better looking concepts. And then the owner was like, oh no, I like that one. Like that happens in architecture and design all the time. That, you know, the play is really like, don't ever allow a design concept out that you can't live with, is what I've been taught, because you never know what an owner is going to choose. Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
Hockey sweaters shouldn't be these like egregious, like hyper complex organisms. Like they're better, they're at their best when they're basic. And this Smashville jersey is just like this cluttered mess. It's super busy and like just stop. Just
stop while you're behind, Nashville. Quit inviting Creed to sing at your arena. Don't ally yourselves with Dave Portnoy. Like, let's just don't do that.
Yeah, don't do all of the things you're doing lately. One thing that should be done, and we're gonna end with this. Austin Matthews posted on Instagram, I believe, that if he raised $134,000 for Movember, he would shave off his I guess now iconic mustache. Movember, every November, obviously, men all across the country raise awareness and money for Movember, who works with a lot of men's issues like mental health, suicide, prostate cancer, testicular cancer. By surpassing his goal, Austin Matthews vowed to shave off his mustache. He shaved it off, and it was weird. I watched the next Maple Leafs game, and I was like, "Who is this boy? And what has he done with his porn stash?"
Yeah, it kind of just looks like an average high school swimmer now. You're like, what? Did you wax your legs too? It was super funny too. He took a picture with mustache and then without the mustache, but with his very hairy, large dog. And everyone's like, "Oh, your mustache was just a dog the whole time."
Yeah,
it's real weird to see him, and I don't know. I kind of miss the mustache.
It's going to take some time to get used to, for sure. It's the first time you see your dad without facial hair. I've never seen my dad without facial hair, so I don't know what that is like, but it was that jarring. It was weird to see, but honestly, $134,000 is a lot of money, and that can go a long way in the right hands. And kudos to Austin Matthews for being awesome about that. That's super cool. Kudos to Austin Matthews, and we're going to leave you on that awesome news. So thank you, everybody, for listening. We didn't put out an episode because of the holiday, and we would have had one earlier, but I have gotten sick for the second time since I got my flu shot. So that's awesome. Thanks, science. Knew not to trust you. If you're looking to interact with us on the internets in weird places, and by weird, I mean social media, because it's fucking weird, find us anywhere on the internets. We have a website, handsomehockey.com, Handsome Hockey Podcast on Instagram, at Handsome Hockey on Twitter, or you can email us at the handsomehockeypod@gmail.com. And we have a reasonably active Facebook page. We have real jobs, so we aren't as active on social media as we should be if we're trying to promote this thing. But check us out, interact with us there, and you might get us to follow your podcast because you've probably got a podcast too.
Yeah, we know everybody we know has a hockey podcast. Obviously, you're listening to us somewhere, but we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Red Circle, and maybe on YouTube. We might actually put some video up. So if you are watching on YouTube, go you, and you can see me doing some jazz fingers.
And we're sorry that you're actually looking at us.
Thank you so much for your interest. We have a lot of fun doing this and commenting on all things hockey. So stay in touch.
Yeah. Have a great weekend. We'll get this out as soon as possible. Everybody take care and stay handsome, everyone.
Restez beau, tout le monde.